Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming, and this is from the depths and the sort of first in my fleet review series of videos, where basically I'm going to look at the ships I'm bringing into the game, give it a quick overview, a bit of history, and a bit of combat, just to see what happens. So instead of doing the build, we're just looking at the ships once they've been built. So in this first series, what we've got is the Fairmiles. So these are, as you can tell, small boats, good for starter, and I'm going to be using this first one as a starter ship in the adventure game, adventure mode. So as a starting point, let's a little bit of history first, and then we'll look at the actual ships one at a time. So Fairmiles, why Fairmiles? So Fairmiles was actually a car manufacturer, or Noel Macklin, who was the car manufacturer, had his factory in Fairmiles in Surrey, and that's how they got the name Fairmiles. Anyway, he was a former Royal Horse Artillery and a Naval Reserve officer, so when the Admiralty wanted a new sub-chaser and harbour patrol boat, he thought he'd put his design expertise into coming up with a design, basically. And the key part about the design that was different to a lot of other places was he created a lot of sub-assemblies that were then put together at the shipyard. This meant that the sub-assemblies could be made by furniture makers, piano makers, anyone that had skill doing woodwork. I think he'd worked out some of this because when we're talking this, 1939, earlier car manufacturers were still using a lot of wood actually in vehicles. We think of plastic and aluminium and all the rest of it at the moment, but early years back in the early 20th century, in the 1900s, there was still a lot of, there weren't wood, but there was some wooding surrounded by metal. Anyway, I'm going too far. Anyway, initially the Admiralty didn't go for this design, but then at the start of the war they saw the benefit of them being made majorly elsewhere other than the shipyards, which were now needed to be used, most of their crew, to build ships which couldn't be sub-assembled. So the Admiralty agreed. Interesting bit, unfortunately the Admiralty Noel Macklin couldn't afford to start the operation off, so the Admiralty bought his company. So effectively he didn't make any profit directly from this design, which is a pity for him, but he became a civil servant. So he basically worked for the Admiralty and got a wage, and so did all the other people in the factory as civil servants. So just an interesting side to that. Okay, looking at the individual ships, the Fairmile designed a number of ships, but we're just looking at the motor launch, motor gunboat, motor torpedo boat, and on here I've given them some categorizations, but we'll leave them as the original names, and we just call them motorboat for the moment. So the Fairmile A was the first one to be made. There was about 24, and this was of them made, and these were designed mainly as the original design of a sub-chaser. So they didn't need to go fast, they had to go faster than a sub, but not hugely fast, and harbour patrol. They had a 3-inch gun on the back, a couple of Lewis machine guns, and depth charges, most importantly, and also a ASDIC to be able to detect submarines. There was the design was mainly made of wood, about 34 metres long. It had a couple of petrol engines, giving it a top speed of around 20 knots. So not hugely fast, but fast enough to catch up with a submarine or someone in a harbour. There was about 24 of this particular version made. for this original idea and was used by the Royal Navy. So my version of this is slightly different, and I'm going to talk about the next version, which is the Fairmile B. Now the Fairmile B was an upgrade to the Fairmile A. Same basic shape, same basic design, same engines, still had a 20 mile an hour, 20 knot speed, 34 meters long, and was very similar in many ways, but the armament changed quite considerably. Now the Fairmile B had about 1,200 of them made, but in the UK, Canada, and I think there was some other colonial. I think I'm not sure about Australia, but they were made by certain other Commonwealth countries. The main difference was at the beginning of the war, when France had been taken over, and the Germans were looking at potentially invading England. The Fairmile B was used as a shore defence and coastal defence ship, as well as the harbour, and they put onto it a couple of 21-inch torpedoes that had been taken from some US destroyers that were being used for minesweeping and anti-submarine. They didn't need the torpedoes anymore, and these were designed to, if the Germans ever invaded the UK, these would come along the coast and shoot up the landing craft and attack the landing ships with the torpedoes. That was the idea anyway. Hopefully they didn't have Mark 14 torpedoes, otherwise the torpedoes would have just been duds anyway. Luckily, never needed. The Fairmile B, though, was used throughout the war. It took part in the St. Nazaire raids, taking commandos into the docksides. A lot of them got lost on that particular mission, but they were used in that particular event. In D-Day, they had their armaments changed, and that's similar to the version I'm working with, in that the 3-pounder gun, which was originally on the back, was moved to the front. A Bofors 14mm was put on the back, a 20mm in the centre, and it still had some Lewis guns, or it's using Vickers machine guns in the centre. Didn't have the torpedoes, but that was not wouldn't have fitted in that particular zone, and they were used as navigation craft, so they were leading the landing craft in towards the beaches, so that landing craft didn't get lost, and you'd have a pilot helping coax and basically shepherd all of the landing craft into the correct beach. I think they may have got wrong on a few occasions, but they generally were used. So that's the history of the Fairmile. There is... Well, oh, sorry, I'd almost forgotten. There was a Fairmile C, which was a slight derivative of the Fairmile B. And then finally there was the Fairmile D. Now the Fairmile D was a different design. It was slightly longer. It had 4 engines inside, and it went up to about 29-30 knots. And this was designed more as a gunboat than a torpedo boat, although there was a torpedo sort of very varied armament. One of the differences was on the deck they were given attachment points, so they could move the armaments around very easily without a complete redesign. It was possible for individual ships to have different armaments, which was an innovative idea. But anyway, this Fairmile D, which there was about I think about 4, nearly 500 of these made, and their main use was to counter the German E-boats and other long medium range attack vessels. So that's why it had the increased speed. It was mainly a gunboat. It had dual 6-pounders, dual 20mm and Vickers machine guns. It was loaded to the gunnels as much as possible with weaponry to attack these E-boats that were attacking shipping in the channel. that's a bit of the history, I think, complete there about that. Hopefully someone new. So these Fairmiles were not a one-off. They weren't. They were used throughout the war into the 1945, and were useful in all around the coast of the UK. So looking at my builds, these will all be on the workshop. And what I'm going to do is build one little unit that actually has these three as drone ships. So if you want each individual, just load it up and then resave them yourself on your area, but it means we can have everything in one entry on the workshop. So what I have built is these, and they all, again, I'll give a little preface to all my builds. I don't use mimics. These are all done with standard blocks, standard weapons. There's no mods. Everything is totally standard. And yeah, as I said, I don't use mimics. I find they look brilliant, but they add to the block count, and I want to keep my block count and cost down, so these are usable in a campaign or adventure mode. And also, I just don't have the ability to work the mimics, to be frankly honest. I'm not that artistic enough. I'm good at following patterns. I'm not great at stuff. Anyway, so that's that little bit out of the way, because people do say, it could look better. If someone wants to make this and mimic it all up, go for it. I'll quite happily give anyone a shout out if they manage to make it look like the real one. Yeah, and it's still usable. Getting back. So this is the Fairmile A. Now my A version is basically armed like the B, but is a lot cheaper. So if we look here, we've only got 11,400 materials, which is relatively cheap. It's still a little bit higher than I would like, and I might make one which is not got something, but it's usable at 11,400. It's got simple weapons, 40mm dual at the back, the quad 20mm in the centre, a couple of the auto cannons. Main weapon for ships is these torpedoes. They are fairly simple torpedoes. I might muck around with them a little bit, but nothing. They're surface skimming. They have no ballast tank. They're just very fast, short range, good against ships. And then we have a 3.7mm on the front, with this basically APHE round, just for basically taking out. It's good against wood and small bits of metal, but it's obviously not going to do anything massive. Let's see, what else have we got? The engine in the thing. Let me just take it over so it stops moving around. So if we come here, we can see this one is fairly tight. These ships are pretty tightly compact in the center, as you can see, so there's no real walkable area. The bigger ships, I've tried to make it so you can go down and walk in the ship. It does have a heartstone, so you can use it in adventure mode. Ammo's fairly low on this, doesn't need to be high. Armor wise, mainly wood, a little bit of alloy and reinforced wood around the AI area, but this is susceptible. Torpedoes would take this out, but it's generally fast and nimble enough to avoid most torpedoes. It doesn't have any missile or torpedo defenses. That is a negative on this. It would put the price up too much to give it those type of defenses, so we're going to go with quantity over quality in this particular area. Engine, couple of fairly simple diesel engines. I call them diesels because they're just basically a supercharged carburetor engine. Nothing amazingly complex there. Yeah, and simple, small. We're trying to think of the right word now, and my brain has totally gone as to what the name of it is. Crank motor. Small crank motor with a 1 meter shaft on the end. So nice and simple. for that. Let's go over here. So nice and simple. While we're on this view, firepower not great. 9.44 total firepower, nothing massive here, but we're looking at a small ship, and armor cost 7.5. Obviously very little armor on this. Right, next, the Fairmile B. And if I just take over here so I can see it, so this is the next upgrade as such. So if we look at it, we can see 17,000 materials, significantly more materials. The firepower 14.4, so 50% more firepower. Speed is the same. It's going to go along roughly 20 knots. I didn't say that with the other one, but this will go along at about 20 knots at maximum speed. Armament is now some modified and upgraded weapons. So whoops, let me just get onto that ship, bear with me. There we go. I shouldn't have come off that ship. So we've got a 60mm gun on the end here, which is basically mimicking it's APHE, so but it's a standard APS gun. On the back I actually put a pom-pom. Now this is my version rather than the Bofors. I've got a pom-pom here and my version of a 20mm here. Now the idea of these, if I bring up my view, you see the 20mm has a nice high rate of fire, about 425 rounds per minute, and it's also using a shot with a flare, in the flare with a in the base to give it higher accuracy. And this is designed to be the accurate gun, and this is a 48mm designed to mimic the pom-poms. It's less accurate, and this is basically putting up a wall of lead with the accuracy just into the area, whereas this is more of a targeted home in. Yes, they're only a 20mm. It's not going to do a lot of damage, and one shot, one kill. These drill through ships, knock out vulnerable areas on the surface. They do quite well actually. Again, machine guns on the side and torpedoes once again. These do have a ballast tank. I was thinking about maybe taking that out, but we'll leave it in for the moment. Yeah, otherwise internals are the same. We've got reinforced wood on the hull on this just to give it a little bit more, a slightly more alloy just to protect the AI area. Again, does have, if we go into, let's put it into build mode, take off the UI, we have a little bit more ammo in this. We have a Heartstone for adventure mode, same couple of engines, doesn't need any more speed, 2 propellers, gets it up to the relevant speed. In general it's reasonable speed, does the job. Yeah, that's the Fairmile B, and it can be a direct upgrade for the Fairmile A, so you can retrofit from the A to the B and it won't destroy itself because the key parts are all in the same place. It's just swap some of the blocks, which is handy. Right, finally the Fairmile D. So the D is it's a bit of a rebuild rather than just a upgrade. You can do a retrofit, but I think some bits will possibly have a problem and it may fall over a little bit. A couple of differences: these have roofs on there where the cockpit is, and this doesn't. I am actually thinking maybe I could put some glass over the top because that will give it a slight bit of armoured in adventure mode from any little fragments etc hitting me. But that'll be the only change I make to this or may recommend. Okay, cost wise, 23,000. So this is more expensive. Firepower 19.28, so that was 14, so it's another 30% higher on the total firepower. Armor is still low. This is alloy mostly alloy. I'm trying to remember if it's some bits of metal around the AI core area, but generally it's just a single alloy armor scheme. This is following the gunboat design, where you've got these 6-pounders, and I'll bring up a picture of, while we're going around, a picture of the one that I modelled this on, where actually the guy sat on one side and the gun was on the right and the ammo loader was behind. Yeah, so it was a slightly off-centre 6-pounder gun, and they were put on the front and the rear. And then we've got this, let me bring up the view, we have another 20mm, but this time it's got even more rate of fire. It's going about 756, which actually sounds a bit low. I thought it was supposed to be, no, that is about right. Okay, so that's running at about 750 rounds per minute. So a nice little, and again nice and accurate. So that's the anti-air guns, and these have basically an APHE similar to the other ones, good at taking out generally wood. They got quite good AP. They will go through some bits of light armor. Again, this one has 4 torpedoes instead of the 2 on the previous ones, so that does add quite a bit of firepower. They're fairly small, fast, surface only torpedoes, but they are the main impact against larger ships, and it does fairly well. Final little bit on each of these, I'll look at this one as an example, is the AI and attack profiles. We'll just have a quick check on those. The main thing is the behaviour. These just have one behaviour, a broadsiding. They're all slightly variations of the same, but it's only a couple of 100 meters difference on each of them. But basically they close to over in 1500 meters straight, and then they will go at a 40 degrees, which is fairly straight. The 40 degrees allows the rear gun to fire and the torpedoes, and then they will bob in and out around the 900 meter range, which keeps the guns firing and the torpedoes, whenever it points roughly in the direction, the torpedoes firing. I think the D has that down maybe about 30 degrees, but otherwise that's the same on the A and B, and that's their basic attack profile that they come in with, which seems to work reasonably well. Let me see, let me get myself on the Fairmile B for the moment. Okay, that's fine. Right, final bit inside. Not much to be walking around. We just have a couple of control blocks here. Simple ones. These are designed to go out. They're not escort ships. They won't stay around to escort the main vessel. They will attack anything it finds basically 4,900 meters. These will go out attack. These are offensive ships. They're no point in sitting around hoping to survive and protect something. So only if there's nothing effectively within 4,900, it will then go on to fleet move. Yeah, this hasn't got a controller at this moment on this ship. Don't really need that. Right, let's give ourselves some combat to see how they perform. Nothing too great. We'll go with, what should we go for? We need marauders, because you always need marauders, but also I want a couple of aircraft to show you the aircraft ability of or the AA ability of these craft. And what else should we have? Let's have a what else have we got on here? Something else which is everything. Actually, what I should do is who's coming for me. That would be a rushing. Okay, we'll have a Shrike, because that looks like that could be coming a potential target within the adventure mode, which is what these are aimed at. That would be enough for now. So if we spawn those in, oops, 3,600, that's fine. So they will start making their way out. The 6-pounder gun on here has got enough range, whereas the 3-pounder on the other two guns isn't quite as long a range. Now, we're already firing torpedoes from the Fairmile B, because those torpedoes are a bit bigger and have a nice long range on them. So that'll be good. What we can see is how everything handles these planes coming in. And these dodge crams quite nicely, and you can see the tracers, that was the word I was looking for earlier, the tracers coming in from that 20mm. There's two of them coming in, and once they converge they start doing the 20mm is very good against straight or level fast vehicles that don't jink around too much. The pom-poms do a decent bit of damage and are good on more erratic. This pom-pom can actually take out a squirrel. It damages the controls, and then as soon as it goes straight, the 20mm just homes in on it. Let's see how these are doing against this here. So this is the simple weapon version. So the A is doing okay. The missiles from the Duster. Oh, so this is the downside. This obviously ran it, by the looks of it, hit a missile or potentially even the crown from the Marauder, but I'm reckoning one of the missiles from the Duster finally caught up with it, which is the downside and is potentially what will happen and why you need more than one. The simple weaponed vessel is having a bit of a problem, but this Duster, yeah, I'm surprised that the D hasn't done something a bit more already. Let's just see the damages. The Marauder's already taken some damage with all the torpedoes flying around, and that Duster has taken damage, which is why it's flying in circles and not firing. So you could say it's sort of done the job. If it's no longer able to work properly, then it's done, then that's fine. So that's where those torpedoes, missiles, could be a problem. The simple simple boat, I have, it's okay against a few ships. As I say, it can get accidentally hit and then it's bye-bye. Okay, let's just wait until they go up for the Marauder and we'll see their attack pattern against the Marauder, hopefully. So note to self in the future is do AA and ship combat test separately, because they actually destroyed the Marauder with their torpedoes even whilst they were dealing with the Dusters. So I've now actually brought in something a little bit bigger, actually, the Kalmar. Let's see how they do. So it's already taken some hits from torpedoes and the guns. You can see the guns are doing a nice little bit of work on the superstructure, which I think is great. That's those 6-pounders, and there's a load of torpedoes coming in. So yeah, the torpedoes are the main anti-ship weapon, and the guns do a reasonable job knocking away blocks. And as I said, these should be really brought in a fleet of 3 or 4 of them, helping each other and getting those torpedoes out as a big alpha strike, rather than relying on getting up close and using the guns. The guns are really designed for flying, for AA, effectively anti-air. Now this has got some missiles, which is going to be problematic. Luckily they're not guided, but again you could get hit by them, especially if you get hit by one of these torpedoes, that will, yeah, is going to destroy that Fairmile. I have no doubt. Is it the B again? Has the B got hit? The B again is the one that's going to be destroyed. Yep, that was expected. These should really stay out of that range, but I think they'll take it out with their torpedoes. And again, you would need 3 or 4 of these working together. And the Kalmar is just about done, and he didn't get destroyed totally. He's repairing. Cool, that's good. Anyway, that's it for the combat test. So yep, good in a group. We're not expected to take no damage, or certain ships are gonna destroy these, but 3 or 4 of them, and I was taking them on a Kalmar, which is significantly more points and firepower than any of these ships individually. So we'll see how they go in an adventure mode, and maybe at some point we'll use them in the campaign as well. You will find a link to the workshop ship in the description, or should do, and if you've got any comments, please leave them down below. I will also be creating like a fleet list in Steam Workshop, so like a one that I'll add all of my Royal Navy ships to, so you can download all the Royal Navy ships in one go. They're not built as a faction, but obviously we can see how they go. If anyone wants to rebuild any of these ships, making them look a little bit better, fine by me. Got no problems with that whatsoever. So as always, leave me comments down below. Next video will be on another one of the Royal Navy ships, and some history again. So until next time, keep playing the game and have fun.